Hey there everyone, Scapegoat Stephen back with another report, taking a slight break today from the event videos and just doing a quick, this is a video that was filmed at Club this week, and we ended up with an A-Force versus Cabal matchup on 17 threat. Now the keen-eyed amongst you will already notice that my opponent actually only has a 15 threat list. That's actually because he doesn't have any 2 threat models in his 10 roster. So maybe that's something to consider for next time. So we ended up with Cabal scoring priority versus the A-Force, and I chose the 17 threat over the 15 threat. We got Gamma Wave sweeps across Midwest and the Montesi formula found, both of which are on that E map, which means it's straight down the middle, 3 objectives for both the extract and the hold. So whether or not, I think personally that benefits the A-Force team, especially She-Hulk. She likes to punch. I've recently acquired Angela, so I thought, why not? Let's spend 11 of my 17 straight away on a She-Hulk Angela. Bought Black Widow in for a low cost, sit on a back objective with Stealth, and Rogue because Rogue is just good. Doesn't matter whether she's in or out of affiliation. And then ended up picking A-Force Assemble, Medpack, Patch Up, Special Delivery, and Stalwart Determination. And my opponent was testing Sin with Crossbones, M.O.D.O.K, and Ultron. He bought the cards Age of Ultron, A.I.M, Lackeys, Extreme Conditioning, Inspiring Monologue, and Illicit Tech. So let's see how it goes. So this is our table. We get M.O.D.O.K going down first for Sin Cabal, and then I'll drop Angela in response directly opposite. Next comes in Ultron, posing on top of a building as he likes to do, followed by Black Widow, again sort of sticking near the centre. We've got Crossbones out towards the side, towards the bottom right of the screen. She-Hulk, I deliberate about where to put her initially, and then I think, you know what, she's getting special delivery. As long as she's right behind Angela, it doesn't matter. Then Sin goes next to Crossbones, and Rogue goes down next to Widow, Black Widow. That's the word I'm after. So, apologies for a little shuffling there of the camera. So we're just sort of discussing really with each other what cards we've got for our tactics cards, and just explaining what they do so our opponent is fully aware. We don't want to create any surprise sort of gotcha type moments, and I think that's quite important, especially when you're all playing new models, just to get the idea across, especially when this is just a game at the club. So we're just trying to understand the game. We're both reasonably new to Marvel Crisis Protocol here. Me and my opponent, I've got I think this is game 11, maybe game 12 under my belt. My opponent's in a similar situation, as are most of our club mates. So it's really interesting starting a new system with a bunch of people who are also starting it as well. So we can kick off first. M.O.D.O.K is going to go. Not going to do a lot, to be honest, but this is first turn. Unless you've got like a first term Alpha Strike plan, tends to be a case of just wandering around trying to secure objectives. So my opponent does choose to go with M.O.D.O.K, and he's just going to bimble forward, just a little bit there, as you can see with the marker, and he's just going to pick up that Montesi book so that he's holding it straight away. I'm then going to use Rogue. I'm going to double move her onto the center objective and take the book there. Partially, this is also to goad a reaction from my opponent, because obviously if he does damage to her, it's going to feed power to my other characters via She-Hulk's leadership, and she's got damage reduction, so actually she's probably okay at this point. So my opponent activates Sin, who just moves twice, the second move being a little bit shorter because she just wants to be in range of Crossbones to use the Partners in Crime ability, which then activates Crossbones immediately. So he's also just going to move twice because he's a bit of a slow person. So he's going to get himself up there. I'm just going to activate Black Widow, just move once and pick up the book. Again, she sat there on that back objective with stealth, so she can't be targeted at range. My opponent's obviously only got Ultron left to go, who also does move twice, I believe, further up the flank. We do have a discussion here about the Gamma Shelter, because I don't think my opponent had properly read the card. So that obviously he's going to take damage if he's outside of the Gamma Shelter, but he just accepted that actually, you know what, it's going to happen, set ourselves up for next turn. I'm then just going to double move She-Hulk so that she's basically in 2 bodyguard range of Rogue and then my final activation, Angela. I always have to check that Angela actually does have a long move with that big base, because it surprises me every time. So she's just going to double move just so she's holding that middle gamma shelter as well. And that's the end of first turn. It's very quick. I've got 2 of the books, and I've got the central gamma shelter and my home gamma shelter scoring me 5. My opponent has 1 book on M.O.D.O.K and his home gamma shelter scoring him 2. So obviously my opponent maintains priority. Now my intention here was I bought 4 characters thinking I'm going to get priority back even if my opponent wins it, like has it first turn. Turns out no, because he also had exactly the same idea and also bought those 4 characters. So during the power phase, I play Stalwart Determination. So it means that any of my A-Force characters cannot be pushed or thrown. So that's basically everyone except Rogue. So my opponent's going to go first, and he's just going to start throwing some damage into Rogue. So he uses his Psionic Blast ability first. He manages a total of 2 damage. Unfortunately, Rogue does have a damage reduction mechanic, so it takes her down to only having taken 1. She-Hulk then gains power off that attack. Does a second Sonic Blast, and it just does 3 down to 2 damage on Rogue again, and I give Angela a power for that. So after having used Stalwart Determination, it still gives me 4 power on She-Hulk and Angela, because they didn't use anything turn 1. So speaking of a special delivery Angela, she is going to now pick up She-Hulk, and they're both going to throw themselves onto my opponent's Gamma Shelter. So I thought, why not do it now? M.O.D.O.K's hasn't got an activation. Ultron's way out of line, out of sort of place towards the bottom of the screen. Now's the time to do it. Get 2 really hard characters onto my opponent's objective. So there goes Angela. She-Hulk gets placed within 1 and then gets a free attack. So she only does 2 damage to M.O.D.O.K, despite having 7 attack dice and M.O.D.O.K only having 1 physical defense. So, you know, it also sets her up, gives her a little bit of power for her own activation, but it does slow him. Not that it matters a huge amount on M.O.D.O.K. Angela's then going to use the Heaven's Wrath ability, basically because it means she attacks at 8 dice, because I add M.O.D.O.K's size to the strike. Unfortunately, she also only does 1 damage. So we started off a little bit lackluster there on M.O.D.O.K for our first 2 attacks. Obviously, Angela's first instance was her move, so she doesn't get to do an attack, or 2 attacks afterwards. But she's basically kind of setting herself up for the following turn as well. Anyone who's played with her against Angela knows she has a toolboxy set of attacks that allow her to do moves. She's also got a good throw, but also like She-Hulk. So my opponent decides then that he doesn't like this, and he's going to get Crossbones to activate and punch Angela a little bit. So unfortunately, does roll pretty poorly and does no damage with his first strike. He then looks at, well, can I throw Angela away? Well, unfortunately not, because of the Stalwart Determination. We have a discussion about Angela's size and obviously the way that tactics card stops the throws or the pushes. So he uses his overpower attack anyway. Unfortunately, he just does 1 damage again to Angela. Really unfortunate, I think, actually, at this point. But this is the nature of Marvel Crisis Protocol dice. They can spike potentially one way or another. What I do then is I put a power on Rogue from that 1 damage that Angela takes. So She-Hulk's going to use superior weight training next, once I faff about and decide whether or not I actually want to activate Rogue. Because I think, do I want to go in an Alpha Strike Sin? But actually, I think no. That would give Ultron an opening to come into Rogue. So instead, I'm going to go with She-Hulk. She-Hulk's going to use that superior weight training and just punch M.O.D.O.K with her standard builder strike. The superior weight training means I get, again, to add the size of M.O.D.O.K to my dice pool, and he is size 4. So we punch him, we do 4 damage, which, you know, is a reasonable amount. We're then just going to do the same attack again, and we daze him because he takes another 3 damage. That's actually quite nice. That gets me, doesn't get me any priority or anything, but it does put M.O.D.O.K closer to death, which I am pretty happy with, especially because I don't want him doing all of his special attacks off at me. It does mean I've got some power in the bank, and I decided to pick up that Daily Bugle kiosk. And you know what? I don't like Crossbones, so we'll just drop it on his head because he's right next to me anyway. I'm also going to pick up the book that M.O.D.O.K drops from being dazed. So that means I've got all 3 books, and currently I have all 3 of the Gamma Shelters. So my opponent's going to activate Sin next, and Sin is going to use the tactic card Extreme Conditioning, which makes her basically able to move a long move. So what he wants to do is force me to come away from the middle objective. So he's going to get Sin so that she comes down to my back gamma objective, at least contesting it at this stage. Obviously, then if he can deal with Black Widow at another point or later in the turn, perhaps with Ultron, then he can control the objective off me. Quite an important one, because again, that back gamma shelter, your opponent's home gamma shelter, is worth 3 points. So it's quite, and at the moment, I've dazed M.O.D.O.K, so I've currently got 2 characters to his 1 healthy, 1 dazed going on in his home one. So I own that objective currently, and obviously Rogue is on the middle. Rogue's then gonna decide, you know what, I've had enough of you, Sin, don't like you being there. She's gonna charge. So she's gonna go and just do 2 damage with the first attack, and then she's going to hit again, but she does no damage on the second attack, but she does crucially sap a point of power to reduce the power that Sin has on her. I'm then going to spend 2 power to use the mutant absorption ability on Rogue. So every hit, crit, or wild removes power, and when you can no longer remove power, it starts doing damage. I roll pretty well, remove Sin's power, and then daze her, which means she drops the book, unfortunately. Oh no, sorry, Sin doesn't have a book. My apologies. Sin doesn't drop a book because she can't. Ultron's then going to try and decide, where does he go? Does he go straight into the middle, just take that middle objective, get some points, or does he come one of the 2 ways? In the end, my opponent decides, you know what, let's just get in that middle objective, let's score some guaranteed points this turn, and then go from there for next turn. Now, I completely and utterly forget that Black Widow hasn't activated and don't do anything with her. Not that she'd have done a lot. Maybe she'd have gone and shot Ultron a little bit, perhaps with her pistols, just to build some power on herself, but I'm not that fussed by it, by missing her activation. So this turn I score 3 books for 3 points, and I also score 4 points for 1 point for my home gamma shelter and 3 points for my opponent's home gamma shelter, taking me up to 12. He scores 2 points for the middle gamma shelter, scoring him 4 points in total. We then have a quick discussion about Sin's leadership, where we misunderstand something, but we've cleared it up for next time. As it happens, Stalwart Determination, I think, would have stopped a lot of the pushes on my objectives, apart from maybe for Rogue. That might have been the only one that might have been a thing. So, but again, we've cleared it up for next time, so we're now fully aware that the model can be contesting the objective, even if it's just there and the opponent holds the objective because they've got more models. Unfortunately, we do look at the second half of the leadership, and Sin fails to roll anything to make anyone drop any asset tokens, unfortunately, so I've still got hold of all 3 books at this stage. My opponent still has priority, as for the previous 2 turns, and he's going to open with M.O.D.O.K because he realises M.O.D.O.K's only got 4 health and She-Hulk is danger close. So he's going to Doomsday Chair on She-Hulk, doing 3 damage and making her bleed. I give Angela a point of power out of that. M.O.D.O.K then does a second attack, which is, I think, a free Doomsday Chair attack due to the nature of the Doomsday Chair. I then spend 2 on She-Hulk to force that attack onto her via the bodyguard type ability. And he does another 4 damage to She-Hulk. I then put a power on Rogue in response. M.O.D.O.K's then going to play A.I.M Lackeys on Ultron, and then he's going to just Psionic Blast She-Hulk. She-Hulk does lose 2 power from this, actually, due to the wilds that my opponent scores, I believe, and does another 3 damage, which means I then give Black Widow a point of power. Point of note, I completely misunderstood She-Hulk's leadership as well. I assumed it was once per round, not once per turn, so I'm actually doing myself out of power in this game, but I'm now again aware of it for future games. Seems very, very powerful to have done it every turn rather than every round. So I'm actually going to activate She-Hulk next. She's got a superior weight training and just strike M.O.D.O.K. And again, as I said, we didn't realise at first that he only had 4 health on that wounded side. So actually, she's just going to take him out in one. Just smack him, take off his 4 health, get him off the table. Which can only gain me 3 power because I had lots of power already. So there is a bit of a discussion back and forth over what we're doing here, and you know, a couple of re-roll abilities that come in, including some on M.O.D.O.K, but he basically just doesn't have a chance, just due to the sheer volume of dice, unfortunately, that She-Hulk rolls. She's then going to spend 2 to Medpack herself for 3, which takes her back to 13 health. So she's only taken 7. She then superior weight trains and does just a second normal attack into Crossbones. Now Crossbones only got 3 health remaining, and he takes 4 damage, so he can't even damage reduction himself into some sort of better defensive position. And unfortunately, he is then dazed by She-Hulk. She then takes a point of damage from bleed and ends her activation, which, to be honest, I'm quite happy with. That was pretty good. It gets M.O.D.O.K off the table for any potential following turn. It dazes Crossbones, so it takes an activation off my opponent as well. So it just leaves him with Sin, who was dazed last turn, and a mostly healthy Ultron. So Sin is going to be chosen to activate next, because I think my opponent was hoping to just generate some power to be able to do something and then run away. Obviously not wanting to tangle too closely with Rogue after last turn. So she's going to auto pistol Black Widow, but unfortunately does no damage. She does get a counter strike off with Black Widow, which does no damage again in return. She does no damage with the rapid fire trigger with Sin for that auto pistol. So then she goes with another set of attacks, does another auto pistol shot and does nothing, and then rapid fires and does 3 damage to Black Widow. She's then going to use Illicit Tech on Black Widow and does daze Black Widow finally after all these attacks. And he's a little bit unfortunate here. My opponent probably should have dazed her sooner. I think it's just the way that the dice fell during a lot of these rolls. Again, as I said earlier, MCP, you can get these weird sort of spikes in different directions. D8 perhaps, and just the nature of the game, you know, the way the game is run and balanced, I think, which is not necessarily a bad thing. You know, it means that you've got less very rigid competitive style lists. It's a bit more open for just sort of a bit more fun, I think, perhaps, and a bit more casual. So as I said, that does daze Black Widow and does force her to drop the Montesi book, which Sin will then pick up in response. She then also gives Rogue Incinerate, which I believe is off the Illicit Tech ability, potentially setting her up for Ultron to do horrible things to her. So I'm going to activate Angela next. Angela is going to eye up Ultron and decide that she's going to use her Blade of Icar attack. So with that, if you get a wild, it allows you to move, advance small, and obviously she's got this huge base. So she's going to get a good bit of movement off it if she wilds, which she does during the attack. And she does manage to do 5 energy damage to Ultron and just straight out daze him. My opponent just, again, unfortunately rolled badly on his defensive stats. And there she goes. Second move, she steps closer to hold the Gamma Shelter because she's healthy and he is dazed. Rogue's the only character left to go. She's going to punch Sin, sap power, do a point of damage. Then she's going to spend 2 for Mutant Absorption again, which only does 1 damage on Sin, but again, it's a bit of damage. She's going to do a further strike, so her second strike, which does another 2 damage, and then getting a little bit mildly annoyed that Sin still isn't dead, she's going to pick up the cement mixer with her final act of desperation and punch Sin with it. And this will actually finally KO Sin. Unfortunately, you know, with Black Widow dazed and Rogue already holding one of the Montesi books, I can't then pick it up when it is dropped by Sin. But, you know, the important thing is there, you know, I've KO'd 2 characters, dazed 2 characters in this turn, and it actually leaves me with quite a commanding position on the board. I've got 2 of the books, which scores me 2 points, and I've got all 3 of the Gamma Shelters due to my healthy characters, meaning I score 8 points this turn, which takes me up to 20. And again, unfortunately, my opponent has none of the books and is holding none of the shelters due to dazed characters. So that ends the game 20-4. So yeah, absolutely brutal game, which I don't think did my opponent any favours with the 2 missions we drew. I think, again, perhaps something to look at with the composition of lists. I don't think normally I would have bought Angela to that sort of ruck. I think I would have bought perhaps Crystal and then maybe, I don't know, swapped out Black Widow for another 4 threat, or even bought another 2 threat and gone a little bit wide. But that would only have been if there had been perhaps a more spread out objectives. Angela, quite liked her. I mean, not that she did a lot this game other than setting up She-Hulk, but I think the delivery to my opponent's Gamma Shelter was probably the game swinging move. I think it definitely gives me a lot of pause for thought when it comes to just running pure A-Force, which is my next plan, just to get an idea as to how they work. I'm just enjoying a bit more beating as opposed to, I've been messing about with Web Warriors for my first sort of like 8 or 9 games, and I like the scenario presence, but occasionally I like to punch people. So I'm going to enjoy playing A-Force moving forward. So actually, the few videos coming probably for the next month or 2 from me personally will be using A-Force. Obviously, that's not counting any videos that I record at events that are of other people playing. But no, I'm really enjoying Marvel Crisis Protocol. I'm getting stuck into some more model painting at the moment. Apologies for the scenery. That is my scenery, so it is all very, very basically a couple of coats of paint and not finished yet, which is, again, on my list of things to do. So yeah, thanks for watching, and see you again next time.